I, Douglas Ducote, an American patriot by the grace of God, do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America from enemies foreign and especially domestic. I, Douglas Ducote, an American patriot by the grace of God, do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America from enemies foreign and especially domestic. Say it with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hello, American Patriots, and welcome to another episode of the Douglas Ducote Show. You had many places you could be tonight, but you chose to be here with me, and for that, I am forever grateful. You know, the Greek philosopher Plato once said, "No one is more hated than he who speaks the truth." And that's a good way of explaining why the far left and many in the Democrat Party and even some in the Republican Party fear people like myself and many others out there on YouTube and social media that speak the truth. They try everything in their power to shut us down and stop us from sharing with you factual information. And real soon, I'll be doing a video breaking down and explaining step by step everything that YouTube is responsible for with my particular show and my YouTube channel. What they're doing should be a crime, but since they're a privately owned company, it's not. More on that in the very near future. Before I get into tonight's lead story, I will tell you this much. The FBI has arrested and federal prosecutors have charged the founder of the Oath Keepers, as well as 10 members of the group in regards to the January 6, 2021 Capitol incident. His name is Stuart Rhodes. He's 56 years old, and he was arrested today in Elm, Texas. They're charging him with seditious conspiracy for his role and these other members, 10 to be exact, for conspiring to basically stop the steal. Where this is going, I don't know. Does the FBI have what they need to lock these people away forever? I don't know. I will tell you this, I'll be following the story, and as more information breaks, I'll get back to you and I'll let you know. But once again, it is drastically important that we win back the House and the Senate come midterms. And then in 2024, we send Joe Biden to wherever he needs to go, probably a mental health facility or maybe an old folks home, somewhere besides where he's at, because he is it's not doing too well right now, which is what the lead story is for tonight. Joe Biden is on track for what could be one of the worst weeks of his presidency as his poll numbers continue to crater. At the same time, his legislative agenda stalls and court battles fail. Today, the Supreme Court blocked Joe Biden's push to force employers across the country with over 100 employees to vaccinate their workers in a 6-3 ruling that dealt a sizable blow to the administration's vaccination push. And we will break down tonight the Supreme Court's decision. That ruling came down as the president was on Capitol Hill trying to lobby support for his party's bill that would overhaul the federal election system in the United States. As part of that push, the president gave a racially charged speech this past Tuesday, linking his GOP opposition to Democrat segregationists like George Wallace, and called for the filibuster to be suspended to pass the bill. Biden learned today that his speech, which was widely panned by Republicans and even drew criticism from his longtime friends, Democrat Senator Dick Durbin and Reverend Al Sharpton, along with his appearance on Capitol Hill, were not enough to sway Democrat Senator Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema, whose support he needs. I will not vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster, Manchin announced today, to go along with Sinema's speech of the Senate floor opposing the move, which delivers a fatal blow to the bill. Biden acknowledged today that the bill could be put away and done with. In addition to the fizzling legislation and court defeat, polling shows the American public's approval of Biden's job performance continues to go down. Joe Biden's approval rating stands at just 33%. Disapproval and 53% among Americans in the Quinnipiac University National Poll conducted January 7th through the 10th and what was released yesterday. Might have misspelled or mispronounced that university, but it's QUINNIPIAC, and it was their poll. Biden's approval is down 3 points from the previous survey that the university did, which was conducted back in November, with disapproval remaining unchanged. According to this poll, the president is deeply underwater on his handling of three top issues: the economy, 34%, foreign policy, 35%, and the coronavirus pandemic, 39%. News of the economic front this week wasn't any better for Joe Biden, as inflation spiked at the fastest pace in nearly 4 decades in December, as rapid price gains fueled consumers' fears about the economy. The Consumer Price Index rose 7% in December from a year ago, according to the new Labor Department reports released yesterday, making the fastest increase since June of 1982, when inflation hit 7.1. The CPI, which measures a bevy of goods ranging from gasoline and healthcare to groceries and rents, jumped 0.5% in the 1-month period from November. On Twitter, Biden was hounded by the hashtag #BareShelvesBiden, which trended on the social media platform as users posted photos of empty grocery stores and retail store shelves, stemming from the supply chain issues that have lingered over the last several months now. Additionally, the president's campaign promise to shut down the coronavirus continues to haunt him. You all remember that, right? During the run-up to election night, he talked about how if you elect him, he had a plan to stop COVID-19 dead in its tracks and save America. He had a plan. Of course, we haven't seen the plan yet. In fact, he's on record saying it can't be stopped. 1.4 million new coronavirus cases in the United States were reported this past Monday, the highest daily total for any country in the world since the start of the pandemic. White House press secretary was asked on Thursday, today, about how things are going. Pretty poorly right now, to which she responded by touting the fact that 200 million people are vaccinated in the United States and cited record job growth. We also recognize that when you have a small margin and threshold in the Senate, it's very difficult to get things done and to get legislation passed, she said. And in fact, that the president, under his leadership, got the American Rescue Plan passed, a bipartisan infrastructure bill with 19 Republican votes in the Senate and about 6 votes in the House. The fact that we are still continuing to work with members to determine the path forward on Build Back Better, that we have the vast majority of Democrats in the Senate supporting voting rights, that's a path forward for us, she said in today's press briefing. Now, let's take a little closer look at what the Supreme Court said today. The Supreme Court has stopped the Biden administration from enforcing a requirement that employees at large businesses be vaccinated against COVID-19 or undergo weekly testing and wear masks on the job. At the same time, the court is allowing the administration to proceed with a vaccine mandate for most healthcare workers in the U.S. The court's order Thursday during a spike in coronavirus cases was a mixed bag for the administration. Efforts to boost the vaccination rate amongst Americans. The court's conservative majority concluded the administration oversteps its authority by seeking to impose the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, that's OSHA, from administration vaccine or test rule on U.S. businesses with at least 100 employees. More than 80 million people would have been affected by this had the Supreme Court not stepped in. OSHA has never before imposed such a mandate, nor has Congress. Indeed, although Congress has enacted significant legislation addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, it has declined to enact any measure similar to what OSHA has propagated here, the conservatives wrote in an unsigned opinion. In dissent, the court's 3 liberals argued that it was the court that was overreaching by substituting its judgment for health experts. Acting outside of its competence and without legal bias, the court displaces the judgment of the government officials given the responsibility to respond to workplace health emergencies, Justice Stephen Breyer, Elaine Kagan, and Sonia Sotomayor wrote in a joint dissent. The vaccine mandate that the court will allow to be enforced nationwide covers virtually all healthcare workers in the country. More than 208 million Americans, 62.7% of the population, are now fully vaccinated. And more than a third of those have received booster shots. And that is according to the Federal Center for Disease Control, the CDC. All 9 justices have gotten booster shots. Now, while we're talking about the shot, let me throw something out there to you real quick. And I'm not going to go into any drastic detail about this, but I will come back later and I will look at the comments that you guys are posting. And here's what I want to know. I want to know what you think about former President Trump and his speeches over the past few days, where he is on record saying that every one of you need to get vaccinated and you need to get boosted. Now, regardless of what you think of Trump, I want to know how you feel about this. I know that a lot of people want to see Trump run again in 2024. Hell, there's people up in Congress right now that would like that as well. And he's on the side of what the Democrats are saying right now. You need to get vaccinated, and you need to get the booster. And he's starting to get more and more vocal about that. So, does that change your opinion at all on Donald Trump running again in 2024? That's tonight's question for you. What do you think about what Trump is saying? Moving right along, critics continue to hammer Joe Biden for his race-baiting comments made during a controversial speech this week in Georgia about Democrats' proposed voting rights law. Biden is one of the worst race-baiting people ever in the White House. It was bad enough when he said the GOP wanted to put Black Americans back in chains. Fox News contributor Ari Fletcher tweeted out Thursday. Now he says disgracing with him on voting laws means you're a segregationist like George Wallace or Bull Connor. How long can he go? Fletcher was the latest high-profile critic of Biden after he warned of a stark between proponents and opponents of the Democrats' election law overhauled bill dubbed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. The unpopular president asked the crowd in Atlanta on Tuesday whether they were on the side of revealed figures like segregationist George Wallace and Confederate President Jefferson Davis, or on the side of civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and the late John Lewis. You couldn't make this shit up if you tried. Biden's polarizing remarks irked members of the media and lawmakers alike, with Senator Tim Scott declaring he was offended by the device speech. It's offensive to me as a Southerner, but more importantly, it's offensive to me as an American, Scott told the story host Martha McKellen. Many pundits echoed Senator Scott and Fletcher, with New York Post columnist John Porrazzi penning a scathing piece about Biden's hypocritical demagogic speech. Congratulations to Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and two Democrat senators who have made it plain they will not vote to kill the filibuster. By not allowing him to lockstep, they are no better than the man who turned horses on peaceful protesters in Birmingham, on peaceful protesters in Birmingham. Prodhartz wrote, went on to say that Biden truly isn't mad at Manchin and Sinema because of voting rights, but instead because they rejected his Build Back Better bill. Because BBB is basically dead, and because his COVID administration is incompetent, and because inflation is going bananas, Biden is staring political catastrophe in the face, they wrote. And so here it is, the pivoting to voting rights. Scare base Democrat voters, especially African Americans, into turning out in November 2022 by saying what he said in 2012 about Mitt Romney and the GOP, that they want to put y'all back in chains. That was Joe Biden's words. Indeed, as Fletcher noted, Biden raised eyebrows back in 2012 when he told a Virginia crowd the Republican Party wanted to put voters in chains that were Black when discussing the impact of deregulating Wall Street and the financial industry. Biden's speech Tuesday was also lampooned by the National Review as pathetic as it was demagoguery, and a piece headlined simply, "What is Biden thinking?" by Washington correspondent John McCormick. On paper, it's hard to think of a worse insult by lumping half of the country or more into the same camp as racists and traitors, McCormick wrote. Many others had thoughts on Biden's remarks and sent out the following tweets. Merced Slap, do you support election integrity? Do you oppose the Dems' power grab over voting in America? Joe Biden just said you support Jim Crow 2.0, and or a domestic enemy on the side of George Wallace and Bull Connor. That's how determined he is to destroy integrity in voting, she tweeted. Jerry Dunley, the speeches by Biden and Camilla pushing Democrat voting laws both began by referencing the Capitol riot. Biden compared anyone who opposes the laws to George Wallace and Bull Connor and Jefferson Davis. The basic thrust is that you're a Republican, you're an insurrectionist, and a racist. Newt Gingrich tweeted, when President Biden cited George Wallace, Bull Connor, and Jefferson Davis in his Atlanta speech, did no one on his staff notice that all three of the bad guys were Democrats? My hat is off to my daughter, Jackie Cushman, whose column notes this irony. You see, let me explain something to you, Newt. They don't give a shit because their people aren't smart enough to research that. Matt Slapp, Joe Biden went to Georgia today and said that you're a domestic enemy on the side of George Wallace and Bull Connor. If you support election integrity and oppose his federal takeover of elections, an appalling speech from a truly divisive president. Kate Perovich, Biden says it's time to pick a side. Do you want to be on the side of Martin Luther King or George Wallace? George Wallace was a Democrat like Biden. A.G. Hamilton tweeted, Joe Biden has suggested that every American opposed to a federal takeover of elections and a Dem power grab is compared to George Wallace supporters. In case you're wondering how he managed to achieve a worse favorability than even Donald J. Trump. Good luck to Dems in November. And then Nick Adams tweeted, someone should tell Joe Biden that George Wallace was a Democrat. It doesn't matter because he doesn't give a shit. His base will not look it up and do their homework. I've been preaching about the Democrat Party for over 10 years now on YouTube. I used to be a Democrat. I'm speaking from experience. They're a bunch of racist bigots. Okay? That's the bottom line. That's why I left the party. When I realized they didn't give a shit about the military, they didn't give a shit about veterans, they didn't give a shit about black people. Look, folks, it's just facts. Look it up. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. Do your own homework. The Biden administration solicitation of a letter that compared protesting parents to domestic terrorists troubled some people who spoke out against it. Recently on Fox News, parents are looking out for their kids. Marvin of Florida told Fox News that's the number one priority, their children, because they are the future of tomorrow. Education Secretary Miguel Condal solicited the National School Boards Association much criticized letter that compared protesting parents to domestic terrorists and suggested using the Patriot Act against them. According to an email exchange first reported by Fox News, the exchange indicates Cardone was more involved with the letter's creation than previously known. Days after the NSBA letter, Attorney General Merrick Garland sent a memo directing the FBI to mobilize in support of local education officials. That's totally ridiculous, Debbie, an educator from New Jersey, told Fox News. Parents have rights for their children. They should be standing up for their children and what is being taught in the classroom. If they're going to be labeled domestic terrorists, what are we going to label these Antifa people? She continued. We should be labeling them as domestic terrorists. I mean, what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. Although it's way more than that, madam. Antifa are domestic terrorists. That's what they are. And those that hijack the BLM movement are domestic terrorists too. that were burning down buildings and torching police cars and attacking innocent people, rioting, looting. Stephen from Florida said, some people are going to school board meetings to make trouble. He said he's scared about where the country is heading. People used to talk with each other, Stephen said. Now, sometimes we say, well, you're a Trump voter. Well, you're not going to talk with you. And you're a Biden voter, but I'm not going to talk with you. And that's scary. And I agree, because we should be able to talk. We should be able to have conversations with each other, Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals, without having to go physically attack someone or verbally assault them. And you should act like an adult. I'm actually having that conversation with somebody on Twitter that in the past has trashed me a lot. And now we have somewhat of an open dialogue, although I don't have the ability to be on Twitter and sit back and be on social media freely anytime I want to. I'm limited in my time and when I can go respond to anyone for anything. But the point is, me and this person are actually communicating with each other as adults, as Americans. And sadly, look, there are people in the Republican Party, people that were subscribed to this channel. And when they found out up in Nashville, Tennessee, that I interviewed several Democrats and they saw those interviews, they flipped out that I was this racist bigot that turned against the Republican Party. And that shit's sad, because all I was trying to prove was that we can have open dialogue. We can at least attempt. And if they won't meet you at least halfway, then fuck it. Don't even attempt it. But that's the problem. We should be able to do that as humans. And if humans would do that more often, this place would be a hell of a lot better than it is. This next story is something that I'm sure when I go into this, a lot of you are going to go, "Oh shit, yeah, you're right, Doug. It's pathetic." So let me start by saying this much: as a parent of a special needs son that participates in Special Olympics, all right? Does anybody for a split second believe that it would be okay if Special Olympics would start allowing kids and adults that do not have special needs to compete in Special Olympics against them? That would be absolute insanity if that was allowed. Well, something very similar to that is happening. Women's sports advocates are speaking out against the NCAA and its rules on transgender student athlete participation ahead of the NCAA championships that will be this coming March, warning that the future of women's sports is in danger if transgender swimmer Lee Thompson of the University of Pennsylvania is allowed to keep competing on the women's team. The Ivy League and the University of Pennsylvania both released statements last week defending Thomas, who has been shattering records in women's swimming ever since she was allowed to switch from the men's to the women's team under NCAA rules after undergoing testosterone suppression treatment. Unlike Penn and the Ivy League, the NCAA has yet to weigh in on the mounting criticism over the transgender athlete policy that critics argue threatens the very future of women's sports. It's about fairness in women's sports, Nancy Hogshead said, a three-time Olympian gold medalist swimmer and chief executive of the advocate group Champion Women, told Fox News Digital in a phone interview yesterday. The competitive edge that Lee Thomas has is multiple times over the competitive advantage that the most doped up East German women had, she said. The most doped up East German women that I've ever competed against, at most, were just a little bit better than we were. However, they were never competitive with men. They were not close to the men's times. Critics, like her, argued that athletes like Thomas should be placed in a separate category for trans athletes, or that competitions featuring a trans athlete should be designated an exhibition contest, which has to be agreed by both competing institutions. That would mean that their times would not count as records and their place would not count as team points. It wouldn't take away a slot from anyone else, but they would be able to be in the pool and compete. Everybody would welcome that and everybody would be cheering for Lee. But right now, when she touches the wall, nobody cheers until the second place finisher. She's doing nothing to make it better for women's sports. All of the acceptance and love and tolerance that one would hope for transgender people in an environment or in the classroom or any place else in society. If anything, she's sort of rolling back that goodwill. People automatically want to have goodwill for a transgender person. But when they see this basic unfairness, it's just not fair. And we've got the science and the statistics to prove it. Other critics mentioned out, like swimming world editor-in-chief John Lawn, says Thomas has only rolled back her times roughly 2 to 3% since she left the men's team and started testosterone suppression therapy, but that male swimmers typically record times that are more than 10% faster than women, meaning she still has a significant competitive edge over her biologically female competitors. NCAA adopted its transgender policy back in 2011, stating that a trans female student athlete being treated with testosterone suppression medication may continue to compete on a men's team, but may not compete on a women's team without changing it to a mixed team status until completing 1 calendar year of testosterone suppression treatment. Thomas, who competed on the men's team for 3 years before switching to the women's team in 2020, has been receiving the treatment for nearly 3 years. Hogshead pointed Fox News to the Webinar about the NCAA policy last April, featuring LaGwen Durden, director of the NCAA Sports Science Institute, and Amy Wilson, managing director of the NCAA's Office of Inclusion, in which Durden admitted the transgender policy was adopted without any significant research guiding its decision. This is definitely a complex issue, Durden said at the time. One reason why it's so challenging is because the science and medical community really hasn't reached a consensus on testosterone threshold. We don't have a definite answer about that. If there is a threshold, that would be, or that should that threshold be? What should it be? So that one piece that's really makes this problematic when we are trying to develop a policy. The lack of research is another issue, she continued. And not to say that there's no research there, but when we are taking a deeper dive and considering what's important for our population of athletes, we're finding the research that's specific to collegiate athletes. If you drill down a bit more and talk about sports-specific impact, when you consider strength and power and possible cardiovascular benefits, when you think about a sport and look at a sprinter versus a distant runner, and having some of the specifics, define research and studies to inform us when and where to determine what's the best policy for our student athletes. Those are really significant challenges we're facing right now. Meanwhile, Thomas, an Austin native, continues to shatter Ivy League records on the women's team. She won the 500-yard freestyle and finals at the Zippy Interventional at University of Akron last month and posted the fastest time for any female college swimmer in the 500-yard and 200-yard freestyle competitions. On Saturday, she won the 200-yard and 500-yard freestyle and finished in 5th place in the 100-yard freestyle during the school's tri-meet with Yale and Dartmouth. I don't care one bit what you identify as or what your sexual orientation is. I don't have any trans friends that I know of. I do have gay friends, male and female. Some that I served in the military with, some I served in law enforcement with, hell, some that I went to school with. And what you do behind closed doors is your business. But if you're born a male and you compete with men in whatever the sport happens to be, and you identify now as transsexual, and you're not able to beat the men that you're up against because of your testosterone reduction that you're doing, it's okay to jump over to the women's side where you have an advantage over them and you can set all these records and just basically wipe away women's sports. There's something wrong with this ideology. Very, very wrong with this ideology. There's no reason for this. Now, men's sports, in swimming at least, will allow women to compete if you'd like to. But men are not allowed to compete with the women unless you consider yourself transgender. I don't know where this is going. I don't know what the final outcome of this is. But the silliness needs to stop. Have a section just for trans people to battle it out in sports. Whatever. But don't erase women's sports by allowing men to compete against them. What you identify with is your business. But if you were born a male, you should not be allowed to go compete and blow away all the women in sports because you identify as trans. And that's what's happening. Not just in America, but planet Earth. Anyhow, tonight's show is a little short because I have a ton of stuff I've got to get accomplished over the next few days. So thank you for being here. Please subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell. If you haven't already done so, go check out douglasducote.com. Check out the website and check out the videos that you can't see here because, I'm not politically correct. In the description of this and all of my videos, as well as my live stream, you can see the different locations. You can follow me on social media that I'm allowed in. Sometimes I'm kicked out of them for silly and stupid reasons, but it is what it is. As always, please say a prayer for our men and women serving in the United States military, our veterans, our law enforcement officers, our first responders and their families, our angel families, and our blue and gold star families. And say a prayer for this country. And part of all of your prayers, if you believe in prayer, should be that midterms is a hands down win for Republicans, because if it isn't, we're in a world of shit. Trust me. Take care, everyone. God bless you. And I'll see you next week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, for the Douglas Ducote Show at 8 p.m. Central Time. If anything breaks between now and then, I'll put out a video about it. Other than that, hope you all have a wonderful and blessed weekend. Wherever you're at, be safe and come back and join us again next Tuesday. Good night, everyone.